new era in football begins tonight. The new Las Vegas Raiders will make their first ever draft picks. The new stadium, they're still under construction. If this season starts on time, they're hoping to play in that building from day one. Their first pick comes later on tonight. We're about to cover one of the most bizarre sporting events of our lifetime, a draft like no other. And these teams are scheduled to be first in line tonight. The Bengals almost now on the clock with Washington, Detroit, the Giants, Miami, waiting and watching, and also in the top 10 picks for right now, Carolina. Chargers ahead of them with Arizona, Jacksonville, and the Cleveland Browns at 10. Teams will still get 10 minutes to make their selection just like any other year. And that's where the similarities to any other NFL draft will end. Welcome to our Draft Night special all across Nexstar Nation. I'm Jared Smalley. We have guest experts planned throughout the night, coming to you from coast to coast, our sister stations, and later tonight our affiliate KLAS in Las Vegas will pick up the back half of this opening round. Now, with the coronavirus outbreak, not much is normal these days, and that includes the process for tonight's draft. Just the first round tonight, but for the first time, a virtual draft. Team management not allowed to gather at their facilities. They're all at their own homes, communicating through Zoom and other online meeting tools. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell will be announcing picks from his basement in New York. Again, 10 minutes allotted for first round picks, but with the technology being used, we're simply not sure how fast or slow all this is going to go. Let's introduce you to the man you're going to hear from for the next couple hours as our Nexstar NFL analyst, a man who played the game at the highest level, former Tennessee Titan, former Miami Hurricane running back, Jarrett Payton, who joins us live from Chicago tonight. Jarrett, let's start with this wild process. We're anticipating there's going to be some technical issues, communication struggles between the teams, between each other. How do you think that will affect the teams when they go to make a decision throughout this draft?
Well, first and foremost, Jared, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. But when you start to thinking about this virtual draft, the one thing that gets me is they're not going to have that camaraderie, especially the GMs, the scouts, and everybody that's inside of those war rooms to be able to have that feeling of when a draft pick where they feel strongly about, they're going to have to do that from distance, from different homes and houses. And so it's going to be a little bit different that way. But I still think the NFL has done a great job in putting together with their IT teams of getting these organizations ready and prepared for tonight's draft.
And Jarrett, quickly on that subject, do you think because of the IT factor in all this tonight, it could cut down on maybe the number of trades we would ordinarily see?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because earlier today I was thinking that we might start seeing a little bit more trades, and you and I had a conversation that maybe these things would happen just a little bit earlier so teams didn't have some of these issues or could maybe run into some of these issues with internet problems. But yeah, I think tonight we're really starting to see, even earlier today, just thinking about maybe what the Lions might do and looking at some of these teams like Miami and the Jacksonville Jaguars maybe looking to move up to get one of the picks that they like.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, especially those teams that want a quarterback early on. We'll find out about that in just a second. We'll get back to Jarrett in just a moment. First of all, the Bengals almost officially on the clock now, although, of course, they've been working on the clock since December when they clinched the #1 overall pick. It was a miserable 2019 season, the first for Zach Taylor as the head coach in Cincy. They lost their first 11 games. They finished 2-14. Of course, the Bengals' needs are plentiful. 30th in points scored, 17 a game. Worst rushing defense in the NFL, 149 yards per game. Now, Jarrett, your thoughts on where Cincinnati stands as they go into tonight. They did franchise tag A.J. Green. He's going to be a part of this team next year. Did that move make sense to you?
Yeah, Jay, it did make sense to me because when you have a guy with that type of talent, we know that injuries have kind of been the main concern, but it seems like everything on that ankle is healed up for A.J. Green. And when you have him, he's a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver. So if you're going to go get a guy like Joe Burrow, then you have to be able to have someone that can go up and get the football for him and a guy that has experience. And I think keeping A.J. Green around is a good thing, especially inside of that locker room. He's one of those guys that are veteran, and you can't have too many veterans, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Certainly can't, and especially when you're coming from 2-14. It never hurts to have some reliable guys with the football. All right, let's talk about the man who you just mentioned a moment ago, likely to be the first pick here in just a matter of minutes from now. You know, from Athens, Ohio to Cincinnati, you just get on Route 32, you go across southern Ohio, takes roughly 2.5 hours. It's an easy trip in the car. That's the drive the Burrow family will be happy to make for years to come, to watch Joe Burrow play NFL football. He was actually born in Iowa, spent his younger years in Nebraska, his dad coaching there, brothers playing there, considers Athens, though, his hometown. That's where the family is gathered tonight watching the draft. His dad, Jimmy, a longtime college coach. He was defensive coordinator at Ohio University when Joe was coming up through school. Jimmy retired last year so he could watch Joe's final college season, and what a wildly entertaining season that was. To get some more insight on the likely marriage between Burrow and the Bengals, we welcome in Whitney Harding, sports anchor at WCMH in Columbus, not far from Athens, of course, to talk about both sides of this partnership. Bengals, Burrow. Let's start with Burrow's path. There was some actual concern from some analysts that he's a little bit of a one-year wonder because he was so sensational last year. Whitney, is any of that fair?
I don't know if it's fair, Jared, because don't you want to improve by leaps and bounds from your first year to your second year? Isn't that what people usually want to see happen? This is a guy who, it's not like he doesn't have the talent. We know this kid can make the throws. I mean, you don't go to Ohio State and you're not able to play. He just got behind two really good quarterbacks there, went to LSU. The big thing for his final year, they really built the offense. They spread it out a lot more. So he had a lot more chances to really get the football out quickly, do some things. I mean, I think he showed with his numbers, definitely capable. So I don't know if that is really a fair assessment. He had a lot of talent on that team to throw to. That's going to be kind of the question with Cincinnati. They do have some great receivers. You guys talked about it with A.J. Green. You can't forget Auden Tate. And, of course, Tyler Boyd, phenomenal year stepping into A.J. Green's shoes while he was hurt this last year. But, I mean, as far as Joe Burrow goes, you know he can make the throws. You know he has the IQ. It's just, can you get him in that right system? And with the way Zach Taylor's kind of doing things at Cincinnati now, kind of a hybrid of some spread West Coast offense, they're going to throw the football. That could be a really, really good position for Joe.
And let's talk about those throwing statistics from just last season, Whitney, because it's truly incredible stuff to think about. There were 65 total touchdowns, 60 of them passing. You know how many picks he threw? That many.
Not many.
Six picks, 60 touchdowns.
Yes.
It's remarkable what he did. Now, as you mentioned a moment ago, what the Bengals have to do with this, Andy Dalton's still on the roster at the moment. So how does that complicate things here down the line? Obviously, it looks like the Bengals, this is a done deal for Burrow.
Right.
So what do you think falls in line here for Andy Dalton?
Maybe you have a great backup quarterback in Andy Dalton, but at the same time, you probably want to get rid of that contract money that he has. It'd be nice to kind of spread around that, maybe $17 million, maybe get some other guys in there. So I think we could see some trades down the line. I mean, it could happen tonight. Who knows? Andy Dalton definitely is still a guy who can play some football. Just maybe the Bengals are now feeling, okay, we have a chance to bring in an Ohio kid. Let's go that direction. So I think a trade could definitely benefit the Bengals, but it also could benefit Joe Burrow to come into a place where you have a guy like Andy Dalton to kind of help show him the ropes, kind of come into that kind of a system where you've got that veteran presence. So a trade could definitely benefit Cincinnati, but if you're not going to get the guys or the amount of guys you need for that, what's wrong with having a veteran quarterback?
Nothing wrong with that, especially when QB1 goes down potentially in the NFL. Happens all the time. Let's talk a little bit more about Burrow's history. Burrow was one of the unique players, I think, in this situation in a draft, to be this highly coveted at the top of the draft and yet have been a transfer. And Joe has two distinct, enormous fan bases, really three if you go back to his high school side in the Athens, Ohio area. But at Ohio State, people loved him. He led his team to the state championship game in Ohio, then transfers because of backup, basically, in terms of the number of guys in the quarterback room, goes to LSU and is an absolute legend now in Baton Rouge. I can't imagine there's a guy with a bigger following than what Joe Burrow has.
I mean, it's kind of a great combination, right? It's an Ohio kid who's played for the Bayou Bengals, now going to go to the Bengals. I mean, it's kind of this special moment. We've seen it here in Ohio before, a different level perhaps when LeBron James went to the Cleveland Cavaliers, but it's that kind of energy, and that is what the Bengals would get. They won't just get the yards, touchdowns, the young arm. They will get the ability to sell this guy as this is an Ohio kid coming to take over this franchise, take over this team. That is a really great benefit that you can have in this situation. So definitely a great story, and it's going to be good for the Bengals to get that energy there. I mean, it's kind of with that franchise and with the fan base, there's always a little bit of that excitement, but by the end of the season, you kind of feel like, well, okay, this is kind of how it's been the last few years. This might be the refresh they need, and what better way than with a home state kid.
Now, Whitney, let's talk a little bit about the Bengals overall. Their defense is obviously not a great situation a year ago, but they did make some acquisitions this offseason, especially up front, to try to boost that lineup. So, yeah, they were 2-14, but they seem to have the confidence of a team that might be much better.
Absolutely. I mean, getting DJ Reader from the Houston Texans, huge move. They made some big moves defensively in this offseason. That brings the pressure up front. Maybe they're looking later in the draft, second or third round, get a linebacker, maybe another edge rusher, somebody like that, because they also brought in some secondary help as well. So they got 2 cornerbacks now from the Vikings coming in. They also brought in some more help back there. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do in later rounds, but they also need some help on the offensive side up front as well. I know you and I have talked about that.
Certainly have. I wanted to point your attention to something here. I want to talk about the schools. This year, we always talk about, like, it's just like these are football factories right across the country and how many players are coming out of these schools. I want to point your attention to this. If you follow the draft year in, year out, and you wonder if all the players really do come from the same places, here's an example of that. The players, from the first round I'm talking about, from the year 2000, so the past 20 years, take a look at this. Ohio State and Alabama are tied for having the most first-round picks over the past 2 decades, both sending 31 players off to the NFL. Miami, Florida State, USC, also football factories over the past couple decades, and that makes perfect sense. Now, Whitney, Ohio State can't count Joe Burrow, but you're in Columbus, and obviously Ohio State's going to be very active here in this first round. We certainly know that with what could be coming up here with Chase Young and Jeffrey Okudah very soon.
Right. I mean, and we've seen it the past few years, the Bosa's coming out, all of those cornerbacks, secondary players for Ohio State. I mean, if you look at the New Orleans Saints roster, it seems like every time you see a name come up, you're like, oh, that's a Buckeye. And Alabama's the same way with different teams. It's amazing. What gets me tonight is not just Joe Burrow. How many LSU Tigers could go, not just in the first round, in this draft in general? They were just, you see why they won the national championship this year. It's just completely stacked. But yeah, I mean, you see why kids go to certain schools, and tonight is a big reason why, you know, coaches can kind of be showing that off a little bit and saying, oh, look, we have more and more coming. And you see why, you know, the secondary players keep coming to places like Ohio State. You see why the running backs go to Alabama, things like that. And it makes a lot of sense when you watch the patterns tonight. Like I said, LSU could have a really big night and weekend.
It certainly could be a very Tiger-heavy weekend here, considering the number. They had 16 guys go to the Combine, LSU did. It was remarkable. They were all over the place, and that's why they won the national championship. It was not just Joe Burrow, by the way. Whitney, one more for you. I want to talk about the Bengals in terms of their long-term view. The second round is just as important to them because of all the holes they have to fill in this team.
Lineman, maybe a guy on the inside, a guard, who can really help with that run game. You look at their numbers last year, and, of course, Joe Mixon rushed for over 1,000 yards, but besides him, there were only 400 or so rushing yards that weren't done by him. So you've really got to get them some help up front, and also if you can get the run game, help with the run game on the line, that helps with pass protection as well. Certainly
can there. By the way, just for clarification, the Bengals are officially on the clock. I can't imagine this is going to be a long time for them to make this pick. I want to go back to Jarrett Payton. And Jarrett, I've got a topic of conversation I think is going to be close and dear to your heart. It's about the running backs available tonight. There has only been maybe 1 or 2 running backs that people have really thought, even though it's a glamour position in college football, might be first-round picks tonight. I'm going to go through a few of the best running backs tonight and let people see who maybe they could be keeping an eye on later on tonight in terms of running back availability. We start with Ohio State and J.K. Dobbins. What he did this past year was absolutely phenomenal for his career, 3-year career. Hard to do better than what he did, and that's a high standard at Ohio State. He went head-to-head twice this year with a really talented Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. For his career, he merely ran for 6,000 yards. That was in 3 years. Don't have to be great at math to figure out how good that is. DeAndre Swift from Georgia, a lot of people like his versatility. Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU, you saw him in the national championship run, just an absolute stud. Zach Moss from Utah, a lot of people haven't seen his best work. He has just been phenomenal. Jarrett, I want to get your opinion on, if you're a team and you need a running back, do you value any of those guys enough to consider a first-round pick?
Oh, definitely, Jay. I mean, you start to look at how, you know, first and foremost, how the running back position has been disvalued over the years. And I think it's really hard because a lot of these guys when you look at a guy like Jonathan Taylor, man, this dude was so close to almost getting to that. If he had like 23 more yards, I think his freshman year, we're talking about back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons. To me, that is unheard of, especially with guys like Ron Dane, and being in that company is huge. But yeah, Swift as well. All these guys, I think there's maybe 3 guys, and all 3 guys that you named, I think have an opportunity to go in the first round. But still, a lot of teams and a lot of organizations are looking at getting these running backs later in the draft because they know they can get value there, and they know the shelf life of a running back is 2 to 3 years. That's what's so hard about going in the first round for that position. But still, you have guys like Ezekiel Elliott at USC, another guy from Ohio State. When those guys come around, you have to be able to snag them. I don't know if they have one of those type of guys in this draft this year.
Yeah, it's awfully difficult to project that, but those are from just their college careers and their tape from college. It's extraordinary how talented those guys are, especially at the top. Jared, I want to talk to you about your experience in the draft. You come from a legendary football family. Your dad, Walter, one of the greatest players in NFL history, undoubtedly so. You had your career that included your opportunity to be a part of the NFL draft. And the big deal that night is this: the phone. You can't wait to hear that thing ring and hear that call. Take me through what your draft night was like and some of the unique experiences you remember from that.
Well, Jay, I was a second day guy, and, being at Miami, I was behind Clinton Portis. We both came in together, Willis McGahee the next year, and then Frank Gore the year after that. So when Frank got his knee injury, I got a chance to be able to play. And then for me, it was my big game in the Orange Bowl, being the MVP. And so I got a chance to kind of have a little bit going to East-West Shrine game, get a little bit of feel of how that feels to play against some of the best players in the country. Mm-hmm. And then on that second day, I was waiting with my phone, and I got a call from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they told me that they're going to get me in the 5th round, and I was super, super excited. My phone rang. It rang, and it was somebody else. It was not the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I had to wait and then become a free agent and had a bunch of phone calls. Jeff Fisher called me, and the relationship with Jeff Fisher and my father, being Chicago Bears, I just felt comfortable to going to Tennessee and getting a chance to be by a guy and behind a guy named Chris Brown, and then Travis Henry came in, so I got a chance to be around a lot of those guys. But it was a tough day sitting around with a room full of 200 people waiting for that phone to ring and making sure that my phone was charged.
That's the part about this that would drive me crazy. If you're an anxious person at all, I can't imagine what this is. Big, tough football players, they're not supposed to worry about these things. I can't imagine that kind of concern. When you finally do find your destination, though, can you take us through what it's like, not only for the player, but for the family and the coaches and everybody who had a hand in the development of a player to get to the next level?
And I think that's what makes tonight so special. And I think virtually, this draft is a little bit different because a lot of these guys, they grew up wanting to play in the NFL, and they won't get a chance tonight to be able to walk across that stage and be, next to the commissioner and wear the hat and have the jersey. So it's going to be a little bit different for a lot of these guys tonight. But every single person that you look back into, not just coaches, but your parents, your friends, your family, and also teachers from school that pushed you to get to that point, it all comes full circle once you get a chance to go wherever you're going. And then once you get there, it's just not about being there. It's about taking it to the next level. And I think that's the cool thing of watching some of these guys, how they develop. They might not be first round guys, but they get into a system that fits them. And once they do, we start to see them really flourish and take their game up another notch.
All right, just to update you on the Bengals selection, time is running out a little bit on their clock. They're down under 4 minutes now on their selection. I can't believe they're actually waiting this long to make the pick. I've been running well, I guess running to the computer now, not running up to the podium anymore. Those days are old. Jared, one quick thing I wanted to ask you about from the overall view of this year's draft. Is there one particular team who you view as maybe the most interesting going into tonight? Maybe a team that can make an enormous step if they maybe play their cards right tonight?
I'm going to have to go with the Miami Dolphins. 14 picks in this draft, and then also, 3 tonight. And I think for them, this is going to be crucial, Jay, for them to figure out which way they want to take this organization. And I think really quick, they have to get a quarterback because that is what runs these NFL teams. You have to have a signal caller that can do pretty much everything, be that coach on the field. So watching what Miami does tonight, especially early on, do they move up? Do they get Tua? Do they get Justin Herbert? If they can do that and figure out that way, and then also some offensive line help, I think they're the most interesting team in this draft this year.
Well, we have just learned the Bengals pick is in, so momentarily we'll know for sure about the new first-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals and the #1 overall pick in this 2020 NFL Draft. If it's not Joe Burrow, we might just have to walk out of here because things will be weird at that point. But one quick thought, following up on that, Jarrett, about the overall view of this Bengals franchise. A quarterback's great, and there's so much investment in a quarterback because of how valuable that position is in the NFL level. But what else do you think they need to try to get this thing turned around from 2-14?
Well, I definitely think you got to figure out offensively on that offensive line and making sure that whoever you're going to select, and if it's going to be a quarterback, that you have that help there. I think also as well, you got to look around on the defensive side of the ball as well. Can you plug and play some of these other guys and put in position, maybe at the cornerback position and also back? And you got to start to look at how the team as a whole. But Jay, it all really starts though with your quarterback. You have to be able to build from there. And if you can't build from there, you don't have that guy, especially a guy that is a little bit different and one of those next level guys that has the potential, then you're pretty much in a hole because we know that this is a quarterback driven league. And to me, that's where it all starts.
Certainly does. And in the case of Joe Burrow, if the Bengals do in fact start there, that's a pretty good place to start. He's had a remarkable career, certainly a remarkable finish to career. I want to make a couple quick points about Joe Burrow. He's at home tonight with his family in Athens, Ohio. And an important story about Joe Burrow that came out during the Heisman Trophy ceremony. You'll recall the incredible speech he gave on stage in New York where he talked about the difficult situation for many people back home in Athens. It is an impoverished area of the state of Ohio, and $500,000 came into the Athens area food bank to support folks because of what Joe Burrow had said. The pick is in from the Cincinnati Bengals, and we can tell you officially now, once and for all, Joe Burrow is in fact a Cincinnati Bengal, and it is truly the capper of a remarkable journey for Joe. An incredible high school career at Athens High School, leading them to the state championship game in one of the great championship games in Ohio high school history. His team actually lost that day to Toledo Central Catholic, and then he went on obviously to Ohio State, and then after a difficult situation there, tied up in a depth chart issue with Dwayne Haskins, he transfers to LSU, and look at what he did. Heisman Trophy, national champion, 60 total touchdowns, and now the #1 pick in the NFL draft. So let's go around the horn and get the thoughts of our panel here as we talk about what this pick means to the Cincinnati Bengals. Jarrett, let's go back to you. Just basically what this confirms for the Bengals and their plans as they move forward here.
They're getting a special talent, Jay. I mean, you really look at this young man, and let's also talk about an undefeated season as well. And it's really hard when you win a national championship or you win a Heisman to be able to live up to all the hype. I think he's more than a football player, man. He's exactly what you want inside of your locker room, inside your organization. He is one of those guys that I believe can really change the face of your organization as well and set the tone. And so Cincinnati is getting not just a quarterback, I think they're getting the face of a franchise. And to me, that's what, the Bengals need. They need to be able to have that, and then from there, build from there. But the kid's special. He can make every single throw that you want, plus his mental capacity to be able to break down defenses, to me, is what makes him different. Also being able to move and throw outside the pocket. This young man is special, and I think we're going to see big things from Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Undeniably special. That's true. Let's go to Whitney Harding back in Columbus now to get your perspective on Joe. And I don't know if you can hear it in your ear from the folks in Athens, Ohio, but I'm sure they're a little excited.
Even people in the newsroom were saying, oh, right, that's great. He already has a hat in his hands. So, no, it definitely is exciting. And Jared, I completely agreed with what he said. It is the intangibles that Joe Burrow has. I mean, you remember the Clemson game when that defense came out, he looked a little rattled from the beginning, but as the game went on, he was able to adjust and get used to things. That is something that you can't really teach, and those are the kind of smarts and the leadership that he is going to bring to this team. And it's a team that you look at pieces, there are things there. So he's not stepping into an empty cupboard, if you will. There are some pieces there. I definitely think it's going to be a good fit. And like I said before, Bengals fans can get excited about this. It is a home state kid staying or coming back home, however you want to put it.
Now, Whitney, well said. Whitney Harding there in Columbus tonight. Thank you, Whitney, for joining us. And now the draft really starts. Number 2, Washington. As you'd expect here at the top of the draft, many problems to resolve. New head coach there in Ron Rivera. They ranked 31st in the NFL in total offense. Fewest points scored, fewest passing yards, second worst rush defense. It was rough. Jarrett, let's go over the medley of problems there in D.C. Last year, 2 first-round picks we mentioned a moment ago. They took Dwayne Haskins out of Ohio State. He became the full-time starter later on, made progress late in the year. Do you think he can be their guy as they move forward?
Well, I know one thing. He's getting Ron Rivera and a coach and a good friend of my family's and mine who I know can take a quarterback and kind of mold him into something special. We saw it with Cam Newton in Carolina. And I think with Dwayne Haskins, he has some of those kind of skill sets that you see in Cam. He's not Cam. But, Jay, I have a hard time believing that he is the guy that can really take over this franchise and lead this franchise to a championship. And so that's where I think the Skins are in a tough position. I mean, Chase Young is what you want. You want to be able to go get a difference maker on defense. But offensively, do you have the right guy in place at quarterback? And if not, you're sitting at a point right now where you can go get one, and that's what I think is going to be interesting to see what the Skins do. I have faith, a little bit of faith in Haskins, but I don't know if he's the right guy for the job.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about their situation in Washington. It is unique. We're going now to WRIC and sports anchor Kirk Nowatzki. He joins us there live to talk about this draft for Washington. Kirk, let's start here with the offense. We were just talking about that with Haskins, and maybe they found a gem with Terry McLaurin at receiver, who was tremendous as a rookie. Where can Ron Rivera build from?
Hey, good evening, Jared. So Rivera has some pieces to build on. Obviously, the Redskins aren't stacked. Otherwise, they wouldn't be picking second. You mentioned Terry McLaurin. He's one of many Skins wide receivers, a young core group of guys growing up with Dwayne Haskins that can hopefully get the job done. They do have a solid running back core, of course, led by Adrian Peterson, as well as Darius Geis. Now, they are lacking some other weapons, be it at tight end. They need some more help on the offensive line. So there is a core to build on behind Haskins and help him. But throughout the course of this draft, they do need plenty of help. They need to bring some more weapons in for Haskins to see that develop. Obviously, it's a brand new head coach, a new system he has to learn, so there will be some more growing pains heading into this season. But hopefully, if Haskins is the guy, they do have to figure it out pretty quickly.
Certainly do, and they could use some help there on offense. The Skins do not have a pick there. You just saw a second ago with their needs. The second round this year, they don't have one in the 6th round either. They traded the 2nd round pick last year to move up in the 1st round, where they took Montez Sweat, another defensive end. So when you look at the list of their most pressing needs right now, it's not necessarily defensive end. Offensive line, you mentioned a moment ago, they could use the help badly, especially at tackle. You mentioned tight end. Jordan Reed may not have a lot of time. And then this man might be the Skins pick, considered the best player available in this draft. Talking about Chase Young from Ohio State. When you take a look at this guy physically, he's just a little bit different. He is an absolute physical freak, a 6'5", 265-pounder who can run. He can play multiple positions. Kirk, what's your thought on his capability to play at the next level?
I think he fits right in, as many experts predict that he is probably the best prospect in the draft. So because of the coronavirus pandemic, I think that hurt the Skins in terms of being able to scout other players, maybe bring in some of those other quarterbacks. So Chase Young is probably that safe bet. Now, bringing him in along with Montez Sweat from last year will help the depth of the defensive line. We talked about where the Redskins need help. The D-line is stacked, and it's not just the past couple of drafts, but before that, they got Jonathan Allen along with Daron Payne out of the University of Alabama. So their D-line right now is stacked. You don't want to be an NFC East quarterback. Those will be hard to deal with. So bringing in Chase Young, you know the impact he's going to have. If you think he is that generational type of player, you almost have to pick him here. There are other options out there, but he just seems too good to pass up on.
Kirk, I'm going to give you one other thing. He's from the D.C. area. Dwayne Haskins last year from the D.C. area. They could build a pro team just out of guys from D.C., right? I mean, Chase is that good.
Yeah, he really is that good. So maybe the familiarity, you know, the people in the area loved when Dwayne Haskins was selected. Of course, another Ohio State guy with Chase Young. So being a Maryland product, there has been a lot of buzz across the D.C. area. Bringing in Chase Young, you see how good of a player he can be. So why not bring in a local kid to hopefully help get things moving in the right direction?
All right, Kirk, the pick is in for Washington. Before we get to the pick, your thoughts. Where do they go here at number 2?
I think it just has to be Chase Young for the reasons that we mentioned. You couldn't really scout some of these other quarterbacks. You know what you have in Dwayne Haskins, and you're still trying to figure it out. The safe bet here was to go with the best player, and if the consensus is he's going to be really that big of an impact at the NFL level, you add him to that defensive line, and you start building from there. All
right, Kirk, well, your prediction has come true. At number 2, Washington has selected Chase Young out of Ohio State, who is just a different kind of athlete. I was talking to his head coach yesterday, Ryan Day from Ohio State, who said that, you know, Ryan has NFL experience. He was an assistant coach in the NFL with San Francisco, and so he knows the type of physical freak that an NFL defensive end really needs to be. And he says this guy is even a different standard than that. He is a special, special talent. Some of the information you need to know on Chase Young, a tremendous talent, obviously, and then it showed up on the field. A year ago, 16.5 sacks for Ohio State, and he didn't even play every game. Remember, he had a couple game suspension in there over the improper benefits issue that he went through. But when you look at the numbers, it was simply dominating. He was actually a Heisman finalist this year, which is such a rarity for a defensive player. He did win the Bednarik Award, the first Buckeye to ever win that award. And so let's go back around the horn to Jarrett first. Jarrett, your thoughts on Chase Young and his fit there at number 2 with Washington?
Well, I knew he was too hard to pass up, Jay. I mean, when you have a guy like that, he could be one of those generational players. And I think that's where an organization, you have to go best available. And I just believe, yeah, you start building from your defense and you start adding to that defensive line. And one of the biggest things is I was talking about earlier with the Cincinnati pick with Joe Burrow is that we know how valuable quarterbacks are in the NFL. And the good ones, they can take games over. The only way to be able to stop that is a pass rush. And if you can get guys on the outside that have motors, that can find ways, good hand placement, and get to the quarterback, that quarterback is not good when he's on his back. And I think that's what you have in a guy like Young. He's a freak. There's not a lot of things that you can look at his game and kind of pick apart. I think the one thing is maybe he might stand up a little bit too tall, especially against the run. But other than that, getting to the quarterback, he is going to be a game changer. And I think a great pick for Washington. It just goes to show that it seems like the Skins really like Dwayne Haskins and think they can build with him, and Ron Rivera, that would kind of be his choice, knowing that he can maybe turn him into something special.
Well, let's move on here to pick number 3 as we move quickly now through the first round. Detroit, the pick has been talked about as a movable pick. We're keeping an eye on whether or not this pick will, in fact, stay in Detroit. They've been open to trading. At least that's been the talk the last couple of weeks. They got to find better players no matter what. Second most yards allowed in the league, 400 yards. Most pass yards allowed, fewest sacks, tied for last in interceptions. Not good, Jarrett. Seemingly, they're always high in the first round when it comes to drafting. Matthew Stafford at quarterback continues, though, to have a nice statistical career. Last year, obviously, it was a little bit of a struggle. He injured his back there. In games where Stafford did not play, Jarrett, they went 0-8. Seems like they're so dependent on him. How do they take the load off his shoulders?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, as a guy sitting here that used to run the rock and maybe take a little pressure off the quarterback, they got to find a capable running back. Kerryon Johnson, we know him. Injuries have always hurt his career since he's been with the Lions. So they got to find a bell cow and a guy that can run the football. To me, that takes a lot of pressure off of Matthew Stafford and doesn't make him have to sling the ball around. But also, they need more help. You were just talking about it. On the defensive side of the ball, they got to find a way to get to the quarterback. So edge rusher is definitely there. The cornerback position, they have to figure that out. That's a need. And offensive line, I don't think you can go wrong with trying to put more bodies on that offensive line.
Certainly can't. Let's talk more about the draft needs for the Lions. Good friend of ours from Wood TV, the great Jack Doles joins us here to talk about Detroit's options at number 3. We're just talking, Jack, about how rough the defense was. Is that a more pressing moment, a more pressing need at this moment than trying to give Stafford some more resources on the offense?
Yeah, absolutely, Jared. They have to address defense right now. As you mentioned with some of those stats, they had the worst passing defense in the NFL last season, and they went ahead and traded Darius Slay to the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jeffrey Okudah makes a lot of sense right here, but the big talk for the Lions has been, do they move down? There's 3 guys the Lions want here. Okudah, they also would like... picks coming in, so hang on one second.
well, more so, Jack, and that we'll get to the pick here in a second. I just wanted to go over that another receiver obviously couldn't hurt, but maybe it's such a deep receiver draft, maybe they get it in round 2, round 3, and elsewhere.
Yeah, they've got a decent number of picks. They did just take Jeffrey Okudah, an Ohio State cornerback, and cornerback is really the position they needed to solidify here, especially after getting rid of Darius Slay, who is a 3-time Pro Bowler and really one of the only Pro Bowlers on this roster outside of Matt Stafford. Great player, but they just did not play well against the defense. It mostly starts on that front 7 there. The Lions did not put any pressure on the quarterback, so I thought maybe they go in a different direction here. But cornerback definitely hits a spot. And you can tell me more about Okudah because you saw him on a regular basis. How happy do you think the Lions will be to have him in their secondary?
I think this is an incredibly fortuitous pick for the Detroit Lions, because Jeffrey Okudah has number 1 talent. This guy is an extraordinary athlete, not just from a speed standpoint, but from a technique standpoint. As you see, first-team All-American this past year. Now, he only had 3 picks. Do not let that deceive you. Teams were terrified to throw at Jeffrey Okudah last year, and as you can see, his 40-yard dash time is outstanding. He can run with anybody. So let's go back around the horde here, get everybody's thoughts on this pick. Jarrett, is this the right pick for the Lions at number 3?
Yeah, Jay, first I want to say what's up to Jack Doles. That's my guy. I really do. I like Okudah. I think his skill set and what he's able to do, he can cover all receiver sizes. And I love the fact of his hips and being able to shift those and get around. He's got great feet. And I think what comes with it is just how hard he works. And if you got a chance to see him and probably know him and talk with him, he is one of those guys that you want to invest your money in because he's just a good kid. He works hard, and I think that's what's going to be great. In the Motor City, they're going to have an opportunity to have a guy that is going to work hard, and when it comes to press man, that's what you love seeing. That's why quarterbacks were not throwing his direction, because they knew he was locked down on their side.
And Jack, Ohio State continues to plump its resume, if you will, as DBU. They continue to turn out first-round defensive backs year after year. Now let's move on from pick round 1 for Detroit, Jack. What else do they have to turn this thing around?
They still need more on defense. I would not be surprised if in this second round the Lions go after a defensive lineman. There's still some pretty good ones in this draft. We'll see what's there. Wouldn't be shocked if they made another move here. He is very open, Bob Quinn is, to trading. And Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are on one of the hotter seats in the National Football League, Jared. I would say this was a seat that would make Satan sweat. They've already been told by Martha Ford that they have to contend this year. So if they don't contend to make the playoffs and make a big jump from that 3 wins they had last year, I think we're going to see yet another leadership change in Detroit. Quinn made kind of a risky move when he got rid of Jim Caldwell after a 9-win season, and they were just on that cusp. And he thought maybe he could step in and just take them to that next level, but they've gone backward here. He's done a pretty good job of drafting. We talked to Mike O'Hara from DetroitLions.com earlier this week, Jared, and he said all these 5th and 6th and 7th round picks that he's made, only 3 are not on this roster, so he's built depth to this roster. There's just not enough frontline talent, or at least the talent they've had hasn't stayed healthy or stayed on the field. Big difference when Matt Stafford wasn't on that field last year. Jared, you know, we talked a little bit about, do they add some more offense? Yeah, they'll address that. Their defensive needs are greater. Last year they went with Hawkinson, T.J. Hawkinson with their first pick, the 8th in the draft. grabbed a tight end from Iowa. Good start, but a questionable year. That move was made partly to help that running game. Yes, Jared Payton had hit that on the head there. They need another running back to help carry on Johnson. Johnson has not stayed healthy. You know, they've added fullbacks, they've added offensive linemen high in the draft the last couple of years, but the running game still hasn't been fixed. They have been pining for a running back in Detroit since Barry Sanders retired. They've yet to fix that.
Well, Jack, appreciate your insight. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. And speaking of a team that has to really turn it around, pick number 4, the New York Football Giants. 4-12. At one point, they lost 9 in a row. They did find some bright spots along the way. Of course, Saquon Barkley is a tremendous athlete. He averaged 77 a game. He is capable of more than that, though. Third most points allowed in the NFL last year. And of course, Daniel Jones at quarterback as a rookie. Not bad. 24 touchdowns, 12 picks. You like that ratio a little bit better for a rookie. So back to Jarrett now in Chicago as we pick up on the Giants here at pick 4. It's gone a little bit as we expected so far. If they've found their quarterback of the future, Jarrett, in Daniel Jones, maybe they have, they got their running back. What's the next logical step for them?
I think you got to look at offensive line help. You know, you got to look at that tackle position and being able to solidify those edges if Daniel Jones is going to be the guy for them. And I believe he is for that organization. But when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley, running the football has to be top priority. And you want to take pressure off, like I said earlier, on some of these young quarterbacks. You got to run the football. And I think also edge rusher, and you got to look on the defensive side, the cornerback position as well. So I think probably the Giants are going to go offensive line, and I think we see the first offensive lineman taken in the draft.
We'll be keeping an eye on that and talk more about the Giants' needs in this draft. We're going to go to New York right now. Liana Bodavita joins us now, sports director at WTEN in New York. Liana, let's talk about the Giants and with all their staff changes this year. Jason Garrett, former Cowboy coach, the new offensive coordinator there. Eli Manning is now a retired football player, so that obviously means Jones, here you go, here's the football. What's expected of Daniel Jones this year?
For sure, he's expected to take a step forward in the right direction. Obviously, he was a rookie last year, and he took over for a quarterback that was the face of the franchise for 16 years, and that's not easy to do. We saw some flashes from him. We saw, you know, he had the arm strength. He had 9 touchdowns, 50-plus yards down the field, but was a little inconsistent there. The biggest inconsistency from him, though, was his ball security. He had 17 fumbles. They lost 11 of them, so he really needs to hold on to the ball a little bit more. He was able to make some plays with his feet. I think they liked that, especially when the offensive line at times could be a little rough there. He did take 38 sacks, and yes, some of those could be the fault of the offensive line, but he does need to get the ball out a little bit faster. His processing time, his release time needs to improve in year 2, and that will be a little bit difficult now that he has to adopt a new system. You had mentioned, you know, a brand new coaching staff here with Joe Judge, and he needs to learn the playbook, and he has to do it from afar with the coronavirus situation. They won't have as many reps together in camp, so it'll be interesting to see how he takes this next step forward.
Certainly will. We just showed the audience there the biggest needs for the Giants going into this coming season and into this draft in particular. Gave up a lot of points last year. Certainly could use help at corner. A couple linemen to give Jones some help down the line. Where do you think they go here at number 4?
Well, I think that Jarrett was exactly right when they say offensive line, if they don't trade back, and I do think that they're looking for a tackle in this draft, but it is a very strong tackle draft. The top 4 on the board, it's really a pick 'em, and they're immediate starters in the NFL. So if they can find a trade partner, I think that Dave Gettleman, though he has never traded down in his career, would be open to that. That being said, I think they do need to get a tackle here. Nate Solder last season was just dreadful. He had 57 pressures allowed. That was 7 more than any other player in the NFL. Between him and Mike Remmers, their 97 pressures allowed was the most in the NFL. And yes, Remmers is gone, but they're looking to fill some holes there. They do have Will Hernandez, a young offensive lineman, and they also have Kevin Zeitler, but those 2 pieces obviously won't be enough. And so with Nate Solder, they owe him a ton of money. He would take a $13 million cap cap hit if they were to release him. So they won't. Wow. They need him to play better at that left tackle position this season. But that being said, he might not be that left tackle for the future. So they really need to draft a guy that can come in, potentially play the right tackle position this year, but potentially move on over. And there are some choices here on the board. Well,
let's talk about that quickly before we get to the Giants pick. That pick is in. We're waiting to hear who that is. Of the tackles that are available here at the top, who's the one that catches your eye the most?
You know, it's interesting. We've heard a lot of buzz about Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa just because they spent so much time with him at the Combine. But he makes me a little bit nervous, only in that, you know, his Combine numbers is really what boosted him from being thought of as a guard to a tackle. And I think sometimes if you fall in love with a player at the Combine, it might not be a great situation. He doesn't maybe have quite the same upside as one of the other guys on the board. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they went with Wirfs. Jedrick Wills out of Alabama. Obviously, there's that strong Alabama connection with Judge and Saban. So at least he'll know a lot and he'll get a lot of insight there. And he'll have a true read on what Jedrick Wills would bring to the table. And you ask 4 different scouts, they'll give you 4 different answers. You'll hear Andrew Thomas's name in there. You'll hear Mekhi Becton thrown in there, who is, by the way, just a massive human being with sky-high talent. It could potentially protect Daniel Jones's blind side for the future, but that's, you know, fingers crossed he stays clean. He had that drug test that was flagged at the Combine, and also he's a big guy, and sometimes those guys continue to get bigger, and he needs to trim some weight. So I wouldn't be surprised if they take any of them, but there's been a lot of buzz around Wirfs.
Well, we just have the pick from the New York Giants, and you are spot on. They've got the correct position you were thinking. It is a tackle for the New York Giants, and they've gone with Andrew Thomas, who is just an incredible workhorse for the Georgia Bulldogs. Had an outstanding SEC career, a guy that's durable. He can play both sides of the line, left and right tackle, a 3-year starter at Georgia. You can imagine the quality of athlete that takes. And again, a first-team All-American. You love the size, you love the athleticism. Everything about Andrew Thomas speaks to a first tackle off the board type player. So let's go around the horn, check our thoughts on this. Jarrett, your thoughts? Did they get this right at number 4?
Well, I agree. I think that, you know, you can't go with all the tackles that are in this draft. I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong. But you start to look at him, at Thomas. He's athletic. He's got all the athleticism that you want, and he's 315, a big body frame. And also in the run game, I love the way his tenacity is of getting after it. So, yeah, I think they got it right. I think they needed this position to fill this hole and fill this need. And I don't think you can go wrong with any of the guys, but this was just their preference. And I think he is going to be an anchor and especially help Daniel Jones to be able to protect him wherever he lands.
And so, Liana, let's look ahead here a little bit now to the rest of the draft for the Giants here, day 2 and 3. Where do they absolutely have to have help before they get out of this draft?
You know what? I think that they really want to address their center position. And I know that seems a bit crazy taking 2 offensive linemen back to back, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they went center next, and they need to address, you know, their edge on defense to get an edge rusher there. They did address some defensive concerns in free agency. They picked up James Bradbury, of course, when Janoris Jenkins left. And so they feel like they have a number 1 corner to go opposite of DeAndre Baker, who they drafted in the first round last year and who struggled as a rookie, but that's a tough position to come in and excel at in year 1. So they're looking for a step up from him. That being said, I would expect center and then an edge rusher.
All right, Liana Bonavita, we will see you back in just a little bit when we talk about the New York Jets. They're just down the road here in this first round. Rounding out the top 5 tonight, the Miami Dolphins. They got off to a miserable start last year. They could use help all over. Worst rushing offense in the NFL, 72 a game is not going to do it. Tied for the most sacks allowed. Quarterbacks beware. Most quarterbacks hit allowed. 147 quarterback hits allowed. Yikes. They also hit the quarterback the fewest times. 23 sacks all last season for Miami. Points allowed per game, not great. Last place. The best news for Miami, Jarrett, 3 first-round picks. This one they've got at number 5. They traded for Pittsburgh's pick at 18. You'll recall that deal from last year. They have Houston's pick as well at 26. Got a little time to dig in on the Dolphins here, Jarrett. Let's talk about this. They changed coordinators. Both sides of the ball, they kind of had to. Chan Gailey's the new offensive coordinator there. Valuable NFL experience, has been everywhere. What's the best route to try and fix this right now?
I know I'm going to sound like I'm speaking from the first overall pick with Cincinnati, but I really think that it's the quarterback position. Offensively, Jay, they have to get better. So to me, this is an opportunity now to be able to get that quarterback for the future and be able to kind of build off of that. They also need offensive line help as well. And you look at the wide receiver position as well. That is another need. But to me, the easy pick now is to go with Tua. And I understand with the injury history, but still, to me, if we threw that out the window, to me, I still believe in my heart he's the best quarterback in this draft if you take away the injury history. And I think right now for Miami, this right there will solidify that spot and also kind of re-energize this franchise that really wants to get back. And I mean, we could be looking at in the AFC East, or you could be looking at the best quarterback for the Dolphins there with Tua. They haven't been able to say that for a long time, as Tom Brady's been in that division for a long time.
Yeah, we just showed the audience the needs for this team. They got 14 picks right now in this draft. 14. They can draft a third of a team, 5 of them in the first 2 rounds. They get 2 second-round picks coming tomorrow, so they could address a lot of those needs here. But let's start at quarterback. As you said there, obviously Tua Tagovailoa, a tremendous opportunity there for Tua at number 5 here, if he is the favorite of Miami. Let's take a look at the best quarterbacks available this year. Obviously, we go after Joe Burrow here about who's available in this class. We've talked a lot about Tua and what he can bring to a team. Is he your favorite of all the guys, including Burrow?
Yeah, I mean, to me, he is the sure pick. And at the position, Jay, you're looking for that sure pick and that sure guy that is going to come in right away and be an impact when you're drafting in the first round. And at the quarterback position, we see teams in the past that have gotten it wrong and set their franchise back a long way. This, with the Tua pick, I think it really solidifies the spot. And it gives them not only one of the best quarterbacks that I've seen in a long time at the college level, but it also gives them that same thing that Cincinnati got. They get a guy that is mature, that understands the spotlight, playing at Alabama, winning national championships, playing in big games. That's what you want at that position. Tua checks all those boxes. The only box he does not check is that he can stay healthy. And I think if I was the Miami Dolphins, I would throw that out the window and take a chance on Tua, because I think he could be that next Russell Wilson type quarterback that can lead you to a Super Bowl.
Well, Jarrett, Tua's going to get the chance. Miami has just turned in the pick, and the pick is Tua Tagovailoa out of Alabama, who obviously won a national championship early in his career at Bama. But as Jarrett alluded to, the concern with him is not talent. The concern is an injury to his hip. He suffered about midway through this season on a rather ugly play. And there were moments where people thought about the Bo Jackson hip injury, which was so detrimental to him in his career and virtually ended the greatness of what we saw in Bo Jackson's athletic career. But you look at the numbers on Tua Tagovailoa, and they simply do not lie. A tremendous talent. He's not the biggest quarterback in the draft, but look at the numbers. 76 touchdowns to 9 picks in his career. You'll take that all day. Again, the hip injury recovery is the main question, if you will, about Tua. Jarrett, your thoughts? Obviously, they get this, but there's still good quarterbacks out there in this draft, right?
Yeah, you look at Jordan Love, I think he is one. I think Justin Herbert is one of those guys that maybe could be that. To me, he's more like a Daniel Jones. You see the potential there. Could he get better? Jordan Love, another guy that can make all the throws. I think a lot of people look at from 2 seasons ago to last season and seeing the numbers kind of change a little bit with Love. But I think getting in the right system, he could actually flourish as well. But you look at the 2 guys that have gone first. You look at Joe Burrow, you look at Tua. Both guys, championship pedigree, everything that you want in your quarterback, everything that you want in the face of your franchise. And I think the Miami Dolphins got it right. And I think hopefully if he can stay healthy, and to me, Jay, it's about how he takes care of himself on the football field. I know he can scramble. We know he can run. But can he get down, slide when he has to, and sacrifice yardage for the football? If he can do that and they can protect him and put some weapons around him, I think this young man can be special. He can make all the throws, and I think his IQ of the game is, bar none, just top notch.
That's very high praise for Tua Tagovailoa, who is the new quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. That completes the top 5 of the draft so far. Here is a look at the top 5 picks to this point. Again, not many surprises so far. Obviously, Joe Burrow at number 1 to Cincinnati. At number 2, Chase Young to Washington. Clearly not a surprise there. And at number 3, Jeffrey Okudah. Here's a look at the order so far. Okudah, again, not a surprise, a need for Detroit and probably the best player at that point. The Giants had to pick a tackle. They went with Andrew Thomas from Georgia. And again, Tua at number 5 to Miami. Let's move on to the 6th pick in this draft. It's the Los Angeles Chargers on the clock, and they unveiled a new team logo this offseason. They got new uniforms. Now they got to build a new team. A major change at quarterback. The Phillip Rivers era is over. Melvin Gordon off to Denver. They actually had a decent offense last year, ranked 6th in total yards, averaged nearly 6 yards a play. And of course, Joey Bosa, still a Charger. Still really, really good. Jarrett, back to you now on the Chargers front. It seems obvious that without Phillip Rivers around, time to find the next Phillip Rivers, right? Where do you think they'll go if they go at that pick here for a quarterback?
I think it's Justin Herbert. I think you got to go with Herbert here because, listen, Tyrod Taylor, we know that he could be a guy that could be a stopback quarterback just for a while. We know that he has starter experience. But to me, it's still about getting the face of your franchise. And you mentioned some key things as the league is growing and we know that they're expanding and we see the new stadium, selling tickets in that stadium. They're going to have to be able to sell something. And to me, a new franchise quarterback, another face of the franchise, to me would truly, truly help long-term for the LA Chargers.
And to talk more about that Charger situation, it is unique. Let's go to Los Angeles. David Pinglor from KTLA. He joins us live to help us set up this draft for the Chargers. David, is it that simple for the Chargers to take the best quarterback and move on, or is there something more to consider at this pick?
Well, you would think so. With Phillip Rivers not here anymore, Phillip Rivers has started every game since 2006. And the last quarterback to start for the Chargers would have been Drew Brees. That's how many games Phillip Rivers has been part of this Chargers organization, obviously gone now. The question is, what are they going to do? Now, I can tell you this, Anthony Lynn, he absolutely will tell you he loves his quarterback right now, Tyrod Taylor. So will they go with the MVP of the Rose Bowl? So Charger fans, if they did go to the Rose Bowl this year in Pasadena, they've got it a little used to the kid from Oregon. So that would be quite interesting. You would think, go for the guy that's the quarterback, the face of the franchise, and they certainly need a face of the franchise with Phillip Rivers not here. But they need a lot of other things as well, guys. They could use a run stopper. They could use an offensive lineman, Mekhi Becton from Louisville. They could use a guy there on the left tackle side. So there's many ways to go here. Personally, I'm thinking they're going to go quarterback. Justin Herbert can play the position at a very high level, and as a rookie, he could step in pretty much immediately. So, but they could use a number of things here, and we'll see what Anthony Lynn and friends are going to do right now. But I'm going to say they're going to go with the quarterback. That's what teams should do, right? The best available option.
You know what? That'll sell in L.A., guaranteed. You know, there are some changes to the Charger offense this year. Russell Okung's gone. Melvin Gordon's gone to Denver. We'll talk more about him coming up later on. So there are obviously other considerations there. And then, David, Jarrett mentioned a moment ago, the stadium situation there. Can you give us an update on the construction? It's been an odd process so far, how far it's coming along, and maybe how the COVID outbreak has affected that timeline.
Well, I can tell you this. I was live there yesterday previewing tonight's draft, and I was told by some people on the construction site before the workers actually do go into the site, they are tested from whether or not they have a fever or not, so their temperatures are taken. As for the construction, it is still projected to be on time. Taylor Swift is supposed to open up the venue on July 25th, but they might not obviously be there with fans, but the construction process is there. And why not, get a big-name quarterback coming from the western side of the United States, playing in such a great venue where also the Los Angeles Rams will play as well. So the construction is on for right now and moving along in the right process, which is interesting because I heard that the lights are on in the Vegas Stadium, but they're not ready to put the lights on here as of yet in Los Angeles.
Baby steps. You know what? The sun shines all the time in Los Angeles. You don't need stadium lights. You're fine. One quick question I wanted to ask you about the AC. Exactly. Problem solved. One quick question about the fan reaction right now to what's going on with the Chargers and the Rams. Now with the two teams in the city, David, where is the city aligning? Are they gravitating toward one or the other? What's the situation there?
It's real easy. The Rams obviously have called Los Angeles home before they moved to St. Louis. You would say it's a Lakers town,
yeah.
But it's really their line with the Rams. So the tenants would be the Chargers in the Rams building owned by Stan Kroenke. So right now I would say it's the Rams, and they've been a little bit more successful as of getting to the Super Bowl last year.
Certainly. Both teams have questions to answer tonight.
Yeah. The pick is in. They're going with Justin Herbert. I'm here. We've got some people here in the background saying Justin Herbert is now going to be the Chargers. So Anthony Lynn gets his quarterback.
You got to break the news, and we'll come right back to you, David, on that subject with this guy. He is a tremendous talent from Oregon, and he's also a super smart quarterback. The Campbell Trophy represents the best student athlete in college football. Justin Herbert wasn't just a good player. He was a bright young man, has a bright future regardless of his football future. But as you can see, a very talented and a big target, 6'6". A guy born and raised in Oregon. A huge moment there for the state of Oregon with Justin Herbert now being the number 6 pick in the NFL draft. Jarrett, your thoughts on Herbert? Obviously, he wasn't your favorite quarterback going into the night, but he appears to be a guy who might be able to help a team immediately.
Yeah, Jay, it's exactly what I was thinking when you think about what you're trying to do offensively, especially now in this modern day NFL. And quarterbacks that come from the Ducks, they like to spread it out. They can throw all of those wide receiver screens, the bubble screens, and also throw the ball down the field. With Justin Herbert, my biggest issue is decision making. He's got to get better at that. And also, too, I think over time, just reading about his time at the Senior Bowl, he showed that he can kind of take in coaching. I think a lot of people were trying to figure out, because he's a quiet kid, can he be a guy to be able to not only lead a huddle, but also a locker room? A lot of reports are this young man, he's got the athleticism, he's got the heart and the drive, so hopefully he can pan out with the Chargers.
Yeah, I think it's a good fit. I think he's a smart guy who understands exactly what's going to be expected of him there. We'll move on down the draft now. We appreciate all our guests so far. With the 7th overall pick, the Carolina Panthers are up at the plate here. Also a new look team. No Cam Newton now. Maybe that's best for Cam because the Panthers tied for the most sacks allowed in the league. The second, however, they had a pretty strong effort defensively. They were second in the league in quarterback sacks, but most points allowed per game. That's a difficult thing to measure there. And, of course, McCaffrey, when you look at what Christian McCaffrey did last year, 1,387 yards, third in the league, and he earned that big contract he just got. Luke Kuechly did retire from the team. There's a new head coach there. All of that is new with Carolina, Jarrett. Feels like a little bit of a rebuild. They brought in a new quarterback this year. Teddy Bridgewater is there. Take me through your thoughts, Jarrett, what you think about they have to address at this number 7 pick.
Well, there's a lot. You look at with Teddy Bridgewater, I think offensively, a guy like Greg Olsen not being around, and he was a staple for that organization. The tight end position is definitely a need. I don't think it's right off the bat. But you look at defensively and offensively, offensive line definitely needs help. So could they address it there? I think defense is the way to go, though. I think they're going to look for that big run stopper, and I think they're going to figure out a way to be able to get that D lineman that can get to the quarterback and add to defensively what they want to do. You also know the linebacker position is something that they're going to have to fill as well, but I think they stick with the defensive line with this pick.
Well, let's go to Charlotte to learn a little bit more about the Panthers' plans here. Joined now by Will Kunkel, sports director at Fox 46 there. He joins us there to set up the draft for Carolina. Hopefully you're doing well, Will. Let's go through some of the changes here with Carolina. Matt Rule, new head coach there, coming from Baylor, obviously in the college ranks. How has he tried to put his unique imprint on the franchise so far?
I think it's been tough so far, frankly. I don't think he's been able to really put his imprint yet outside of bringing a whole bunch of Temple grads in here, like P.J. Walker at quarterback, who tore up the XFL. He was the uncrowned MVP of that league. Tahir Whitehead, former Temple as well, linebacker now, taking the place of Luke Kuechly, and already showing that he's very smart, wearing number 52 instead of number 59, so he's not going to wear Luke's number. But it's more David Tepper, really, the owner of the Panthers, that's made his imprint on this league, or on this team, I should say. Thomas Davis, a couple years ago, was one of the faces of this franchise, not here. Julius Peppers retiring. Cam Newton now this year. Greg Olsen. So it's more David Tepper that's inserting his will on this franchise, and you pay billions and billions seemingly of dollars to buy a franchise, you know you're going to put your mark on it. Yeah, you should. You know, you break it, you buy it, as they say. A couple of the needs we just showed the audience a moment ago. What is facing Carolina tonight, in particular on defense, help up front seems to make a lot of sense. Could be in the market maybe for one of those highly rated defensive tackles. With Kuechly obviously moving on for retirement. Do they need a linebacker? We mentioned a moment ago with the Chargers, Russell Okung, the trade there. So he's a Panther. Nice addition there. What do you think is the biggest need they need to address right now? Anyone on defense. I mean, anyone. They need starters, and they have spots that have got to be filled right now. I don't like going defensive line at the 7th spot. They need a lot of help there, yes, but I think that Isaiah Simmons is the guy that they have got to take. He can play all sorts of positions, positionless football. Matt Rule has touched on that, so I am huge on Isaiah Simmons going to the Panthers for a linebacker. As a linebacker, he can play the corner slot as well. They need help at safety. They need help at corner as well as defensive line. So anyone on the defensive side of the ball. So if they go with CeeDee Lamb here, which has been the rumor on talk radio, but we all know how phooey that can be at times, I'm going to lose my mind, guys.
Okay, first of all, deep breath. We're all good. These are tough times. It's a stressful situation. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about the Christian McCaffrey deal. He got a huge contract from Carolina at a position where sometimes that's a very difficult thing for a team to commit that kind of money, those kind of years, to a player at that position. A wise move for Carolina, you think, moving forward?
I think it's something you probably had to do. Christian McCaffrey is much more than just a running back, though. He was the third player in NFL history to go 1,000 rushing, 1,000 receiving. He's the first player in NFL history to go for 2,500 and 2,500. So he does absolutely everything for this team. He's certainly the face of the franchise now as well. Without Luke there, Greg Olsen, Thomas Davis, Cam Newton, all out the door. And you got to have somebody that requires fans to buy a ticket, get in seats, buy jerseys, and get some money for the franchise. And not to mention, he's an awesome, awesome player. And for my money, he's the best running back in football right now. I know he doesn't look like it, but just look at the numbers. That's all you got to do. He does everything. So that's why he got paid what he did. He's young enough, but I understand the skepticism because this team is not on the cusp of being any good. They have a lot of holes to fill. The offense has some weapons, perhaps, but it's going to be interesting to see how that actually happens under Joe Brady and Matt Rule, who are in the NFL for the first time. But nonetheless, I don't have a problem with the deal generally.
Well, the pick is in, Will. We're going to get your reaction to that pick in just a moment.
Oh, my God, they went with Derek Brown?
They went, yes, you got it right. So let me bring up this big fella here. Hang on with me for a second. This guy, I got to tell you, if you're a Carolina fan, I would prefer him be on my team. This is a scary, scary guy when you consider his size and athleticism. Check out the resume on this player. Derek Brown is a special, special talent out of Auburn, a guy who really dominated even in the SEC. First team All-American, 4 sacks last year, just clogs the line of scrimmage at 326 pounds. All those tackles, but that only that's only a whisper of what his capabilities are. Let's get Jarrett's thoughts on this. Jarrett, a big defensive tackle, probably the best one available this year. What's your thought on his fit with Carolina?
Well, Jay, I hope you remember when you were asking me which direction they were going to go, I did say defensive line. So, man, you look at Derek Brown. He is a run stopper. You love the fact that he's got that big motor and can not only just clog up the hole for the run game, but also get to the quarterback as well. And that motor at that big of a size of man, that right there is something different. And that is a game changer for your defensive line. Listen, I played with Vince Wilfork at the University of Miami. He went on to be playing with the Patriots. I know what a big man like that can do. That definitely changes the landscape of your defense when you get a guy like Brown. It
certainly does, and your linebackers love it too. Him eating up all those blocks, that certainly helps things. Let's go back to Will in Charlotte. Will, calm down, take a breath. Your thoughts here on what this basically allows Carolina to do now, taking Brown at number 7 here.
All right, what this does in a positive light is that it helps them up front and shore up their run defense because they were absolutely atrocious against the run last year. He can redefine the line of scrimmage, yes. However, at the 7th overall pick, I think that you need a guy, if you're going defensive line, that gets to the quarterback because that's how you win games in the NFL today. This guy is not great at getting at the quarterback. He's very good at clogging up holes, taking blockers for the linebackers to do their job well. But I would have liked to see them take Brown a little bit later in the draft and take Isaiah Simmons at this point in the draft. Nonetheless, Derek Brown is now the newest member of the Carolina Panthers. And here we go. Hopefully it all works out. I want him to work out. I don't love the pick at this point because, I think you could have gotten Kinlaw from South Carolina a little bit later as well, who could have taken up some spots at the defensive line spot. I just don't love this spot, this pick this high. That's all.
You know what? We need more raw, honest reaction in this world, and that, Will, I think you nailed in that regard following this. What's the draft situation look like for the weekend for Carolina? Anybody that you have your eye on that you think would be a perfect fit for this team?
No one in particular, honestly. I think that they have to get a starting safety. They have to get a starting quarterback. They have to get a starting linebacker as well. Sure. And they might want to work on something on the offensive line as well to protect Teddy Bridgewater. The offensive line was extremely banged up last year. Healthy, obviously, coming into the season. But defense for this team. And the good thing is they can get a wide receiver that could make an impact in the NFL next year later in the draft because this class is so deep. There are some players out there that they could take that would make some sense for them. It's so tough to predict later on because so many players and teams are going to move around.
Absolutely.
But defense, they don't have a starting safety, corner, or linebacker, and they have just filled out that need, at least in the defensive tackle spot.
Yeah, time to go find those folks this weekend. Will Kunkel, thanks for your insight tonight there from Charlotte. We appreciate it. And we'll move on to Arizona now, the 8th overall pick in this draft. Cliff Kingsbury's first year produced 5 whole wins. Defense, the major problem. They allowed the most yards in the league, 402 a game, allowed the second most passing yards, 281 of those. Really tough in terms of defensive backfield. They struggled defending the pass. They did get after the quarterback with Chandler Jones, 19 sacks. And Jarrett, that pick is in. And that pick from Arizona is probably the most versatile player in this draft. Isaiah Simmons can play virtually every position on the football field. I'm not kidding. He can do everything at all 3 levels of a defense. He can play safety, he can walk up and play linebacker, and even put his hand down in the dirt and play a 3 technique as a defensive end. Maybe the most versatile athlete we've seen come out of the college ranks in quite some time. He won the Butkus Award this past year for the top linebacker, but he played everything. First team All-American for Clemson, leading them to the national championship game. You saw his performance against Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl, had the interception that was critical in the second half of that game. And of course, a heavy tackle load over the past couple seasons for him. 101 tackles. It was just an absolutely remarkable number for him. So again, that is Isaiah Simmons from Clemson going to Arizona with the 8th pick. That means the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock now. So a pretty interesting development there for Arizona. They absolutely fit a need with Isaiah Simmons. I want to talk about some of the schools as we await the ninth pick here from Jacksonville a few minutes away. Some of the schools that have absolutely dominated in this draft. You might hear the same names like Ohio State, LSU, Clemson. Here's an example of that. I've got a graphic to show you the schools with the most players who went to the NFL draft this year. Now, obviously, Joe Burrow is one of those 16 players that represented LSU this year at the NFL Combine. 11 former Buckeyes went to Indianapolis this year. Surprisingly, 11 Michigan Wolverines were there as well. There could be a Wolverine later in the first round of this draft. Georgia, Alabama, both with 10 players invited to the Combine this year as well. We'll move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars now at number 9 in the draft. Going to be a busy, busy weekend for the Jags. They have 9 picks this week. They did not run the ball well. 26th in total offense. Also did not stop the run well. 28th in the league. Gardner Minshew became a star. An excellent rookie year at quarterback. 21 touchdowns against just 6 interceptions. His completion percentage above 60%. Pretty strong stuff. And we'll talk about Jacksonville now. Jacksonville with 2 first-round picks, the other one coming at number 20. So it is a pressure-filled night for Jacksonville to try to get this right. Joining us now is, let's see here. Let's go online to Greg Jarrett. And I'm sorry, Greg Talbot is up. Greg Talbot is up from WSAV, joining us now to talk about a very busy weekend for the Jaguars there. Greg, let's talk about some of the changes. Jay Gruden is in there, former head coach in Washington, trying to help out that offense. Injury-plagued tight end situation, but Tyler Eifert is new to the team, perhaps could lift them up. Overall, what did you make of their offseason?
Well, I'll tell you what, Jared, not the first time in the last couple of years that a lot of the off-season drama has been more exciting than the on-field product for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But despite all the moves that you mentioned, I think the most interesting thing about this offseason for this team was the fact that they finally got rid of Nick Foles. They went with the young Gardner Minshew, bringing the youth movement into full effect here for this team. But the question on everybody's mind is, just how good is this team going to be this year? A report from ESPN earlier in the week talking about the NFL draft said that many teams in the NFL are starting to refer to the Jaguars in kind of hush-hush league circles as the Trevor Lawrence team. So could it be possible that even though they give the keys to Gardner Minshew and they're trying to pick up some electrifying early round picks in the NFL draft this year, that they're still not going to be very good and they might be in position to go get Trevor Lawrence next year? So a lot of needs. They dealt a lot of the star players from that big playoff run a couple of years ago. It had a lot to do with quarterbacks in the offseason this year. A
couple of rounds here. You could see them going a number of ways, right? I mean, they've got needs at defensive line. Certainly the interior of that line would make sense. They got a little help at corner, it would seem. Certainly a tackle makes sense to help out Gardner Minshew or whoever's playing quarterback. Maybe they think about a quarterback as they figure out a long-term solution. As you just mentioned, maybe that waits a year. So maybe it's a protection at this point for a quarterback. What's your thought about what they do here at 9?
I'll tell you what, the last couple of minutes, based on all the projections we had for the Jaguars from all our expert analysts that we talked to this week, that all kind of went out the window because it was supposed to be Derek Brown. Derek Brown was supposed to be available here to kind of start clocking the defensive line for Jacksonville. A lot of people on CBS Sports mentioned this week that if Brown was gone, it was going to be Georgia offensive tackle Andrew Thomas. He went way earlier than a couple people expected. So based on what we've kind of been seeing these next couple of minutes, I would not be surprised if this Jaguars pick is the beginning of the runs, maybe on wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy from Alabama is still available. CeeDee Lamb from Oklahoma is still available. Maybe you're talking about, Jentrick Willis, an offensive lineman from Alabama. So unlike a couple other teams we've seen these last couple minutes, the Jaguars have so many different kind of pressing needs at different places. It would not be entirely surprising to see them go with any of these options. But it has not been a fun couple of minutes for Jaguars executives, certainly for us in our studio here, seeing all the guys they wanted just go tick, 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 tick.
Well, there's plenty of fish in the sea at pick number 9. Plenty of great players out there, Greg. We got a minute here before the Jaguars announce their pick. Their pick is in to the commissioner. That'll be public here momentarily. A couple interesting guys from the Jaguars' perspective in the last couple of weeks here. All the trade rumors about Fournette, that he might be dealt somewhere, those have not come true yet. Perhaps that is a thing that could still occur. And then Yannick Ngakoue, almost in a verbal spat with ownership. Doesn't think he's going to be playing there anymore. Take us through those two guys and the possibility either one of them still playing in Jacksonville this year.
Well, I'll tell you what, just in the last couple of days, there have been trade rumors for both of these guys. It seems like even as recently as yesterday, it was pretty public news that the Jaguars were trying to shop Fournette. And it's not that Leonard Fournette is not talented, but like you mentioned a couple of minutes ago when you were on the phone with one of the other reporters, Jacksonville was, I think, number 26 in rushing the last year in the NFL. So you combine that with the fact that he has a $4.1 million deal next year. He's 25 going on 26. It might be kind of hard to find another team that is willing to eat that money and eat that mileage on a guy who in the modern NFL, a lot of people kind of think his prime rushing years might already be behind him. That's why I think he might be sticking around in Jacksonville next year, just because unless you find a way to shop him in a trade, it might be kind of difficult to find a way to get someone to just eat that contract. But I think Yannick spat with management on Twitter last week. I think that's a pretty sure sign he's a goner instead. Yeah,
it's a very likely scenario. It's very rare that you can insult your boss in life and expect to get a raise or a promotion. Greg, I've never really encountered that in my career. The pick will be in here very shortly from Jacksonville. Just a quick thought on the weekend in general. What does Jacksonville have to establish here to get some momentum going to 2020?
I think the really important thing is now that you've given the keys, at least this year, to Gardner Minshew at quarterback. You had a couple of those stars who were entering their mid-late 20s from that playoff run a couple of years ago. It is time for the youth movement to take full effect for Jacksonville. So you need to get guys that are going to bring this team and their fans back to the stadium and back to relevance. This was a really exciting, at least young, a couple of years ago team. Those guys are long gone now. Jalen Ramsey's gone, guys like him. But you need to find some names. If you're going to go full youth movement, get the most electrifying players you can. Since you have a couple early picks, you have number 9, you have number 20.
Well, the good news for Jacksonville, Greg, we've just got the pick. And the pick can hop in the car and be in Jacksonville whenever it's safe to do so. The pick is C.J. Henderson, a defensive back and a really fine one from Florida, a guy who can make a difference. And again, a guy from the SEC, tried, true, tested player at Florida. And look at the 40-yard dash time, under 4.4. That's exactly what you want from a high-end lockdown corner. First team All-SEC, and again, he didn't play the whole year. 9 games for him. Broke up 11 passes this year. But again, when you're a lockdown corner, you don't always get the bulk of the work from the other team's offense. So that's a little bit of an unfair grade. Jarrett Payton is back with us now. We're going to go back to Jarrett and get his analysis here on what you would think of this fit at number 9 for the Jaguars with C.J. Henderson, the second cornerback off the board. Jarrett, your thought on this pick?
Well, I love the pick. I mean, he is, when you look for a guy that plays big and can go up against big, tall receivers, he is that guy. He's athletic. And I love the fact that he is not afraid of press man. And I think that's what you need, especially nowadays in the NFL. When you got these big, tall receivers, you got to be able to have someone that can lock them down. I think he's going to be a good fit. And I think it's definitely a big need for the Jaguars. And this is what happens in the draft. You look at a guy that you like, and next thing you know, he's off the board. You got to take the next best available. I don't think they can go wrong with CJ at that spot.
Well, I appreciate that, Jarrett. Good to have you back on board. We're going to move on in the top 10. We appreciate Greg at WSAV helping us out. And now, no city in America loves the NFL draft like Cleveland, Ohio. The Browns, I mean, they got a movie made about them on draft day. They're on the clock coming off a 6-10 season. They ran the ball fantastic. Nick Chubb is just an incredible player, 4th in the league in rushing. They could not stop the run, though. They finished 30th in that department. Baker Mayfield, obviously, it was a rough sophomore year, for being honest. 22 touchdowns, 21 picks. He completed under 60% for the year. There is new team management now in Cleveland. Andrew Berry's the youngest GM in the league, in fact, in league history. Kevin Stefanski is the new head coach there. He gets the job. Jarrett Payton, back to you to address one of the most interesting teams in football every year. Wide view of their roster, Jarrett, it looks like a playoff team. Why aren't they right now?
I think it's the culture inside of that locker room. And I think with, changing at the head coach position and also, too, just trying to figure out what is going to be your philosophy and how you're going to go about this business. But, Jay, it starts with the guy that you were just talking about, Baker Mayfield. He's got to change his demeanor, his impact to the game. And when you look around the league, especially over time, you've seen that the guys that are your overall top quarterbacks, they lead by example. And I think you got to have the guy at the top who everybody looks at. They got to have confidence in him. And if you can figure that out and be unselfish inside of that locker room with all that talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball and the talent on the defense, there's no reason why those expectations shouldn't become real.
Well, it's about to be a reality for the Cleveland Browns. That pick is already in. We're going to go to Cleveland in just a second once the pick is made. The biggest need, I thought, Jared, going into this draft for Cleveland was at offensive tackle. And that is the need that they have addressed with Jedrick Wills of Alabama, who is a hoss, as you might imagine, a guy at this level of football. This is my favorite photo of Jedrick. I can get this to pull up for us here. Look at that. If I'm a quarterback, I don't mind if he's in front of me. A big, scary guy who scared a lot of opponents in the SEC this year. Jedrick Wills, second-team All-American. And look at that 40-yard dash time. 5 flat nearly for a man of that size is some moving. And again, he started 28 straight at tackle for Alabama. For first-hand reaction on that pick, let's now go to Cleveland. P.J. Ziegler is standing by there in Cleveland from our Fox 8 affiliate there to talk about the Browns, what they did. I don't think it was any shock, P.J. They went with tackle here. But why do you think Wills is maybe the way that the Browns management decided to go with this pick?
Yeah, very interesting. With Mekhi Becton still on the board there, obviously that guy's a mountain of a man at 6'7", 365 pounds, had that 5'1" 40 at the combine, but also had that flag drug test. You wonder how much maybe that played in the decision that the Browns went and what their offensive tackle order looked like in terms of who was number 1, who was number 2, who was number 3, and who was number 4. I mean, there were 7 of these offensive linemen in the draft. You knew the Browns were eyeing one of them. You didn't know exactly what order they were looking at these guys, but Jedrick Wills, obviously, if you can play at Alabama and you can be a big-time player in the SEC, you can certainly play in the National Football League, and the Browns certainly hoping that will be the case as they try to build around quarterback Baker Mayfield. We know how much of a struggle that offensive line was last year. They had kind of a rotating lineup, if you will, at that position, and that's really been a big key since Joe Thomas retired from the National Football League. So good to see the Browns going after their biggest need, offensive tackle, because during the week and leading up to the draft, there was a lot of talk with Paul DePodesta, the chief strategy officer, on what his philosophy is. And he says, we take the best available player, not necessarily drafting for need, but certainly offensive lineman was a big need here, and they went and they got it with the offensive tackle out of Alabama.
And PJ, obviously this is one pick in a draft, and when you talk about Cleveland and the intensity and the fire about the NFL draft, fans aren't just excited about pick 1. They want the whole buffet. They want all 3 days. Let's talk about the other needs that the Browns you think have to address this weekend to get them from that team that looks like a little bit of an underachiever.
Yeah, so 2 big positions of need. Now, they filled a lot of holes on the defensive side a little bit during free agency, and they certainly filled some of those key gaps on the offensive side. In fact, in free agency, it was an offensive draft class, according to Paul DePodesta, and so that's why they made a lot of those free agent moves there on the offensive side of the football. The defense will most likely be the storyline for the Browns with this draft. They will look to go heavy on the defensive side. You have to fill the spot that was left behind by Joe Schobert, the linebacker position. Also the safety position, one of those other keys that the Browns need to fill on that defensive side of the ball. They got some help with Myles Garrett on the other side. What happens with Olivier Vernon? Will he still be a Brown come the beginning of training camp in July or August or whenever that seems to happen again? Somebody opposite to play opposite of Myles Garrett there, but certainly linebacker would be the next big need as they let Joe Schobert go in free agency, and then safety would be the next big need defensively as well for the Browns.
All right, PJ, appreciate that. I think they're going to like that pick in Cleveland. I know Baker Mayfield's going to love it, that's for sure. Thanks very much, PJ. Appreciate your help. Here's a quick recap of the top 10 picks in this draft. Again, Joe Burrow at number 1, and no big surprises in the top 5. Andrew Thomas at 4, the first tackle off the board from Georgia. Really good fit, you would think, for the Giants. And Tua, the second quarterback, he goes to Miami. That was pretty much somewhat expected. The next 5 picks we just finished, and here's a look at the next, the group from 6 through 10. Really good looking group here for 6 through 10 in NFL draft, with Justin Herbert going to Los Angeles. You got Derek Brown in Carolina. Isaiah Simmons, again, the versatility of him is just an incredible opportunity there for Arizona. With C.J. Henderson at 9, and then again, Jedrick Wills going to Cleveland with the 10th pick. We move on now to pick 11, and the New York Jets are back on the clock. Here is what's coming up for the Jets afterward. You got Vegas. You got the Niners drafting this high, coming off an incredible run to the Super Bowl last year. Tampa Bay, of course, no one more interesting than them. And Denver is in the 15th spot right now. As we move along here, 9:30 Eastern time, the pick is at number 11 for the Jets. And again, they won 7 games last year with the worst offense in the league. By total yards anyway. They were 31st in rushing, 29th in passing. How'd they win those games? Top 10 defense. They were pretty daggone good. Sam Darnold, 19 touchdowns, 13 picks in 13 games as a rookie there. Adam Gase going into his second season in charge of the Jets. And Jarrett Payton rejoins us to dive in on the other New York team. Talked about the Giants earlier, now to the Jets. Quiet offseason, really. No major crazy free agent moves for them. They did finish their last 8 games pretty strong. They were 6-2 in that stretch. Are they a team trending the right direction at least?
Yeah, Jay, I think so. I think they're heading in the right direction. You talked about defensively. They have a really solid defense, but offensively, they got to get better. And for Sam Darnold, you got to be able to give him some more targets on the outside. When you look at explosive plays from the Jets last year, not a lot. They were almost at the last of the league. I think one of the last teams in the league when you look at explosive plays. And so going to get a receiver here makes sense. So, you know, with CeeDee Lamb, or you look at some of these other guys, you can maybe get a really good receiver right here, and I think that's what you're looking for with the Jets.
Liana Bonavita again. Liana rejoins us now from WTEN in New York to talk about the Jets draft. You were target spot on there with the Giants in terms of evaluating the position they needed, and I'm just curious your thought about what Jarrett just said with receiver. Do you think that's the way they go here?
Well, it's one of two things. It's either a receiver or it's an offensive lineman, because it's all about Sam Darnold at this point. Do you protect him, or do you give him another target and weapon on the outside? Obviously, Robbie Anderson leaving in free agency, so that is a need. At this point, they really only have Quincy Enunwa, Jamison Crowder, Enunwa coming off that injury, and, you know, Herndon, what's he going to be when he comes back at tight end? So they doesn't have a lot of targets to throw to, and yes, they could certainly use a receiver, and there are some great talented receivers on the board. That being said, it's also a deep receiver class, so they could potentially wait, get a really good guy in the second round, and shore up their offensive line here that they did address a bit in free agency. Joe Douglas, yes, you said it wasn't a big splashy free agent class, but he did sign 3 offensive linemen to help shore up the trenches a little bit. He tends to like to build his teams with the draft, and so you can expect that to happen a bit here tonight, of course. This is his first draft with the Jets, but it's one of those two things. It's either going to be a lineman or a receiver here.
Now, Liana, I'm going to come back to you in just a second here. The pick is in for the Jets. We'll get that pick in just a moment. Liana, about this topic with the Jets, the big flashy deal last year was Le'Veon Bell. It was an okay season for Le'Veon, if we're being honest here. Obviously, he's got to be better, but the team has to be better, and I would guess something on the offensive line would certainly help that. We do have the pick, Liana, and I'm going to let you have first crack at this, because this dude is the biggest guy in the draft. Mekhi Becton is 6 feet 7 inches tall. He's more than 360 pounds. We'll get you the numbers on Mekhi Becton out of Louisville. And again, Liana, I'm going to come right to you for this. But first, I want to show everybody The measurables on this guy blew everybody away at the NFL Combine. 7-foot wingspan, an incredible, reach, incredible ability. His footwork is actually very good. And look at the 40-yard dash time, a 5.1 from a man of that size. So, Liana, let's come right back to you on this point about that pick and how valuable that could be to Sam Darnold and company.
Yeah, he's a monster of a man, and you mentioned it there too, super athletic. So he, of all of the tackles that were coming out in this draft class, was considered to maybe have the highest ceiling here because of what he could potentially do at this next level. He could protect, Darnold's blind side for, the next 15 years if he can stay clean, obviously, and also stay a little bit trim. You don't want him to get out of shape. That being said, you had mentioned Le'Veon Bell too, and really helping him along. This has been a tough year for him, obviously adjusting to a new system with Adam Gase and the familiarity there, and also the quarterback play early in last season really wasn't great, with Sam Darnold going down with mono, missing the first 4 games, and so it was really a one-dimensional offense. Hopefully, in year 3 of Darnold's career, he can continue in the right direction there, but also this offensive line was a big part of that ground game too. So you get 3 guys in free agency, you add a 4th here, and that should do it in the trenches for them. It should make them so much better up front. And we know, while those aren't, the fun, flashy picks, that's really where a lot of NFL ball games are won.
Exactly right. You win them in ugly ways, and that's a great way to solve that issue. Liana Bonavita from New York, thank you so much for joining us tonight for those picks, both with the Giants and the Jets. And now we move to the well-traveled Raiders. Oakland, Los Angeles, Oakland, hello, Vegas. First ever pick of the Vegas Raiders coming up in a few minutes from now, coming off a 7-9 season for John Gruden back in the league. His imprint on the team became obvious in the way they threw the football. They were top 10 in the league in passing. I'd call it an efficient year for Derek Carr. 21 touchdowns, 8 picks, better than 70% completions, maybe not explosive in some ways. And defending the pass, the Raiders were not effective this past year. 27th in the NFL in that category. Couple first-round picks for the Raiders here tonight. They got 12, and then they also have Chicago's pick at 19. Jarrett, we'll start with you. Huge night ahead for Vegas here. What did you learn from John Gruden's first year back in coaching?
Jay, I learned that he still has it. He has all those things that you want in a coach. And just talking to guys that I know that have relationships with the organization, he is bringing that fire back and bringing back trying to restore. Done in free agency on the defensive side of the ball. Now this actually makes sense now to really start going offense for in the draft. And so trying to figure out where you can go, and receiver could be a goal here, but also Mike Mayock wants to really make this a statement in this draft for the Raiders moving to Vegas, and really wants to put a stamp on that. And then also as well for that franchise out there in the fan base, this could be a big pick, and I think one that could hopefully start selling some more jerseys. So I think it's going to be an offensive pick, especially probably a wide receiver.
Well, speaking of Vegas, let's get right to Vegas. They are on the clock. In fact, the pick has been turned in. Let's go right there. Huge night for the city. Sports director Chris Matthews are joining us now from KLAS to talk about this night for Vegas. That pick is almost in. Chris, I would imagine the enthusiasm there just to get this rolling. You can taste it.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you what, welcome to Las Vegas. Who would have ever thought that 5 years ago, that Las Vegas would have a franchise, and it is the Las Vegas Raiders. As you mentioned, the pick is in. We're waiting to find out what the Raiders do. Chris Matthews along with Kenny White, CEO of Kenny White Sports. And I'll tell you what, Kenny, this is an interesting pick. The pick is in, waiting to see who the Raiders make. It's an historic pick. There were C.D. Lamb, you got Ruggs, you've got Jerry Jeudy, you got these talented receivers. So we're going to find out what happens. The commissioner's holding that card right now.
You know, as exciting as it is for these young men to get drafted and starting a new journey in their life, as a city, we get a new journey with a professional football team, and this is our first pick. It is very historic.
Yeah, historic time as the commissioner reads the name. Of course, they needed a receiver. They needed a cornerback, but a receiver. They wanted a number 1 type talent guy that could go out there and get the job done. And Henry Ruggs is the guy from Montgomery, Alabama. You can see him. He's on his bench right there, sitting on his couch with his family. He's the guy. Well, he was the fastest guy at the NFL Combine. If you want a guy, Henry Ruggs III, is the guy the Raiders pick, an historic pick, the first one ever for Las Vegas, from Montgomery, Alabama. We mentioned he ran the fastest time at the Combine in that 40, just a 4.28 or whatever it was. I mean, this guy is absolutely a speedster. He's going to be able to help Derek Carr down the road. I like this pick. I really do.
I absolutely love it. I thought he'd be the first wide receiver off the board with that 4.27 speed. And the vertical leap, this guy has all the tools to be a great wide receiver. They're going to love him. The Raiders, they love to throw deep.
Now, we bring Kenny White in because he had all the numbers. The betting numbers, been doing that here in Las Vegas for years and years. What did the numbers tell you about Judy, about CeeDee Lamb, and about Henry Ruggs?
Yeah, the money today was all on CeeDee Lamb. The number was 12.5 in his draft position, and it was bet down to minus 240 under 12.5. Jerry Jeudy was at 12.5. A little bit of money on the over. I don't know if there was a smoke screen thrown out there today about a knee issue he had at Alabama that nobody knew about. And this just came out, so there was money on the over there. Henry Ruggs, it's been all under money. He was at 15.5, down to 14.5, down to 13.5.
What about Jerry Jeudy? It seems like Jerry Jeudy, prior to the Combine, everybody was talking about this guy being the best guy out there.
He's the best route runner of all the receivers, an amazing player. This year, though, he had a couple of drops that people thought maybe lost a little bit of concentration, but he's an outstanding athlete. We're going to be listing his name real fast. I'm sure the 49ers are just licking their chops right now.
All right, so the Raiders, historically, they pick Henry Ruggs III, the first player taken for the Las Vegas Raiders. Hey, and let me very quickly, this is the debut right here. You'll be able to buy these tonight. Las Vegas Raiders 2020.
All right.
This is the world debut of this hat right here, coming from Las Vegas. Oh, I might also mention tonight, at some time during this draft, Commissioner Roger Goodell is going to announce that Las Vegas will host the 2022 NFL Draft. It's going to happen sometime tonight. Big night for Las Vegas. They certainly need that. We'll send it back to Columbus. Jared, back to you guys.
Well, Chris, we missed the party this year, but next year that'll be something special in Vegas. Those guys, by the way, Chris and his team in Vegas are going to be taking over the hosting of the second part of this first round here, so they aren't going very far from here. They're good and warmed up, ready to go. We stay now back in the Bay Area. From Vegas, we go over to San Francisco. The rich could get richer at number 13. The Niners, they got this pick off a trade with Indianapolis. They sent DeForest Buckner to get the pick from the Colts. Another one coming later, obviously the number 31 pick they would have got from being the runner-up in the Super Bowl. Again, minutes away from winning a world championship. They were 13-3, the NFC champs. And they got the formula, second in the NFL in points scored, fourth in total yards, second in the league in rushing, and then the second-ranked total defense with an incredible pass rush there, Nick Bosa and company. Jarrett, you were in Miami for the Super Bowl. You saw what unfolded there in that incredible game, and you saw what the Niners are capable of. I would imagine they can be right back there this next year.
Yeah, Jay, you know how hard it is to be able to get back to a Super Bowl, but when you have everything that you have at your disposal, it's kind of makes it a little bit easier, but they can run the football. They're old-fashioned. I love that, how Shanahan wants to run the football, and I think if they get some more help at the wide receiver position, that could definitely help Jimmy Garoppolo. To me, he is the one. He's the big question mark. Can he make another step this year? And if he can do that, it's definitely going to help the Niners getting back to the Super Bowl. But in this one, you also need some defensive tackle help. You could also look at trying to figure out how to bolster up maybe another tight end. But I think right here for them, get another receiver, because there are some good receivers on the board to be able to help Jimmy Garoppolo.
Certainly are. There's a lot of talent there. As you mentioned there, what the needs are for San Francisco, they're limited, admittedly. It's a very, very talented team, but the rich can get richer here. They did have a big offseason. They got Eric Armstead re-signed, 5-year extension, so the defensive line, as good as they are, they remain stout. Emmanuel Sanders is gone, so yeah, exactly. At receiver, maybe that's the move. Corner, defensive lineman. Big, talent-rich roster, though. I'll throw a couple guys out to you. Obviously, Ruggs just went off the board. What about Javon Kinlaw, the defensive tackle from South Carolina, and the potential of that as a fit to an already incredible defensive line?
I think that would be huge. I mean, when you're trying to really get to the quarterback, you need all facets. And so, to me, if you can bolster up your defensive line, you can, try to maneuver guys in and out that can play inside, outside. If you can do that, it really puts a strain on offenses, especially offensive lines, to be able to kind of block that up front. And so, anytime you can add experience and you can add a little bit of flavor to your defensive line, it's always one in the trenches, offensively and defensively. And I think people cannot forget about that, Jay.
Yeah, very, very talented young man, athletic. He's got the tools you need to be in the NFL. The Niners pick is coming in here shortly. They're under 2 minutes to go on the clock. Something that I wanted to talk with you, we haven't had a chance. The things have been going so fast tonight, Jarrett, but I wanted to talk to you about the fact that this is one way to get your team better. Another way is through free agency. If you want to spend that cash, there's some really good free agents out there who are still available, including a pair of quarterbacks. You got guys like Cam Newton, Jameis Winston on the board available. Jadeveon Clowney is available. Logan Ryan is out there, and Prince Amukamara also out there as free agents. Jarrett, when you look at that roster, that's a pretty good-looking roster, especially you consider the season Winston just came off of. If you're a team looking for a player, any of those guys interest you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Cam is interesting. Jameis, too. I think with Jameis, when you look at his last season, I know the picks are one of those things that a lot of people harp on, but the man can spin the rock. And I think if you're looking for a quarterback, especially to be, a backup to your starter, and you need somebody, Jay, it's really hard to find competent backups in the NFL. And if you can get one with starter experience, you've definitely got to go out and get it. So interesting to see what happens to Jameis Winston. A lot of people, they harp on him a little bit. This man's a starter. He knows how to play the game. And you look at how many yards he threw for last year. I know the picks are still there. He's a guy that can spin the rock. He could be a backup, and if something happens, he could be your starter.
Buddy, up to speed here on what's going on. There has been our first trade in this NFL draft. The 49ers have traded that pick, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the most interesting team in football, are now on the clock. So Tampa Bay is here ready to go, and we'll get right into the Tampa Bay draft. Basically, no team has had a better offseason in terms of interest. They got Tom Brady to come to Tampa. They got Gronk to come to Tampa. You look at what they did last year for Bruce Arians. They threw it all over the yard. They were third in the league in total offense, first in passing with the aforementioned Jameis Winston. Bucs, though, last in the league in picks, and that's why they've made this change at quarterback. And, of course, on defense, they were also last in the league in passing yards allowed. So Tampa Bay is on the clock. And to learn more, we swiftly move from Jarrett in Chicago to Karen Loftus at WFLA in Tampa to talk about what has been an incredible offseason for Tampa. Probably, Karen, not since the days of Warren Sapp, Keyshawn Johnson and company winning the Super Bowl have Tampa fans been this excited about a new season. Take us through the buzz around Brady, Gronkowski, and the Bucs.
It's definitely been electric around Tampa Bay, just all of the hype around this team. I mean, Tom Brady in itself was just an incredible move for the team. And then you add Rob Gronkowski to the mix, too. It's just going to be an exciting team to watch, and it's definitely the place that all the players want to come play. So things got interesting there with picks 10 and 11. Offensive tackles got taken, and I think once they got Tom Brady, it was very clear that the Bucs wanted to do everything they could to shore up that offensive line and get some depth at offensive line to protect Tom Brady at all costs. So you guys just saw we had our first trade. So they moved up that one spot, traded with the 49ers there. So it looks like they were really wanting to get Wirfs. They were the four offensive linemen, the offensive tackles that really set themselves apart from the rest of the bunch there. And they must have been concerned that the 49ers maybe would have taken Wirfs, who is out of Iowa. Yeah. Big Ten offensive lineman, can't really go wrong with that. So I think that that's why they traded up that one spot, is that they were maybe concerned that he was going to be off the board.
Let's talk more about what Tampa needs this year. It could go a lot of different ways here. Now at 13 instead of 14, they would like to give Brady maybe another target. He's got such a good receiver core there with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin there. Maybe a quarterback for the future. We'll see what they do. Again, they did not run the football well. That pick is in for Tampa, and we await that selection from the commissioner. But in moments, we'll know what Tampa is going to do here. Now at 13 from 14, and the pick is in. The pick is the tackle. Karen alluded to it a moment ago. The pick is Tristan Wirfs from Iowa, who, as she alluded to, the Big Ten is such an offensive lineman factory, but in particular, University of Iowa is just incredible at producing offensive linemen. It is what Kirk Ferentz does. He coaches up these offensive linemen, and again, here's the Big Ten lineman of the year going to the NFL. Tristan Wirfs at 6'4", 320 pounds, only allowed 2 sacks in 2 years, and that last statistic, yikes, 450-pound hang clean for 4 reps. Iowa record, world's strongest man kind of stuff. That's incredible. And now he is an offensive lineman for Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I want to first go back to Karen Loftus there at WFLA in Tampa. Karen, you mentioned Tristan's name. How do you think he fits in with the offense around him now?
I think he's a good fit. Like I was saying, it was really those top 4 offensive linemen, and he was really, though, right in the mix with those other guys as somebody you couldn't go wrong with. And obviously they felt as such that they wanted to trade up even 1 pick to make sure that they got him because he is such a high caliber player. I mean, he's a huge dude. You mentioned his strength, but I mean, 6'5", 320, he's a huge guy, and you want somebody who is mature and can contribute right away, somebody who is going to have those reps that he got in the Big Ten and just some hard-nosed football and some solid reps at the collegiate level that he can jump right into the mix and be a viable offensive lineman for the Bucs.
All right, Karen Loftus, certainly appreciate you being with us tonight from WFLA. Could not be a more exciting team in the league right now than Tampa. So a quick reset here. We are now back to the 14th pick, and San Francisco trading back the 1 slot in order to get Tampa Bay to 13. So here we are at 14 now with San Francisco. We were just talking up the 49ers. We'll bring Jarrett Payton back in here as we size up a little bit of this strategy. Our first trade of the night, Jarrett. I was curious how trades would unfold in an all-online draft. We now have a blueprint for it, a 1-move pick. But you also maybe understand the value of it. If they have that high of value on that player, you can understand why you'd want to make the deal.
Oh, definitely, Jay. You have to. If you're looking at your draft board and there's a guy that's there and he's high, you have to move up and get him. And, you know, just being here in Chicago, we've seen that, you know, with Mitchell Trubisky and Ryan Pace. When you feel confident in somebody, that's what you go up and do. And with Wirfs, he is one of the guys that, to me, if you want to look at all of these tackles, especially Wills, these guys can play on the left side and they can be dominant on the right side as well. So interchangeable. To have a guy like that is definitely going to help out Tom Brady and definitely help out that Buccaneers offensive line and that offense, especially in the run game as well. He's super athletic.
So we'll recap here a little bit with San Francisco. We were just alluding to this a moment ago about what their needs are. They were willing to take a step back in the draft here, obviously, to this pick from Tampa. So here's San Francisco back up. And again, we can just recap those needs, Jarrett, because when you look at receiver and what that could allow this offense to do with Jimmy Garoppolo, he's the guy there. And there is an opportunity to get better at that position in a draft, which is loaded at receiver. I do want to get your impressions of the best receivers here in this draft because, you know, we haven't seen a big run on them so far, but over the next probably the rest of this round and probably into round 2, I think you're going to see a bunch of them go. Is there 1 or 2 in particular who you think who are available at this point that would make perfect sense there?
Jay, this is easy for me. I can't believe he's not off the board yet. Jerry Jeudy, he is not only, to me, the best receiver, but when you look at what he's able to do, his route running ability is bar none top notch, and that's what you love. I mean, he can get in and out, take you one way, take you the other way, and I love the fact that how he sets up all of his routes. To me, that young man is going to make some quarterback and some franchise very, very happy by just seeing how technical he is with his route running, his footwork, especially just from coming from college to the NFL, I believe he can take it to a whole nother level once he finds a home in the NFL.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy has remarkable speed. I brought Jerry up here on my monitor to give you an impression. This young man, as you mentioned, incredible speed, really good hands. It seems like when he just got the ball in college, he was gone. So Jerry Jeudy is a great option. There are a lot of options, though, Jarrett. I want to talk about this guy right here. T. Higgins of Clemson, in some mock drafts, is not even a first-round projected pick. With my own eyeballs, I saw this guy play this year in the Fiesta Bowl, and I would be terrified of him as an NFL defensive backfield. He is a huge target with good speed, reliable hands. It just seems to me that he is an
length at the quarterback position to be able to deal with some of these guys. We can see that the jump ball, especially down in the red zone, has become such a big part of NFL offenses. A guy that can go up and get the ball can get you touchdowns, especially in those critical times when you're in the win zone, and I call that the red zone, where you can get points on the board. This class of receivers is unbelievable. I think that that's where we're looking at it. I'm kind of surprised that there's not been a run yet, but like you said, I believe it's going to happen. We're going to start seeing the floodgates open on these wide receivers.
I believe you're right, and it might be right here. It might be at this pick. We're under a minute to go on the clock for San Francisco, so that pick should be in shortly, unless, of course, they trade it again, Jarrett. Who knows? It's that kind of night in the draft, but there are some interesting moves to be made here in the next few minutes. We're approaching 10 o'clock in the East right now. Denver is up next at 15, and that is a team that I have a very keen interest on what they're going to do, because they made some interesting moves this offseason. They have some concerns as well, an aging quarterback situation. They've got some things to resolve. Atlanta is coming up here. It's 16 and a few picks. One other curiosity I have, there are 4 teams this year, Jarrett, that don't have a first-round pick. You're talking about teams like Buffalo and Pittsburgh, who are not currently in there. Indianapolis is not currently in there. Houston. If you're a team and you don't have a first-round pick, Jarrett, how hamstrung does that make you when you're trying to assemble your roster for the next year?
Come on, Jay. You're talking to a Chicago Bear fan and a guy that covers the Bears. It's so rough. I mean, especially on a night like tonight, on the first round, where you know you can get guys that are going to be difference makers, you know, at certain positions and positions of need. And so it is hard. And for teams like the Bears, you're sitting back and you're watching. And I understand. Listen, going to get Khalil Mack, I understand that he is a game changer. To me, going to be a Hall of Famer once he's done playing this game. But once you're giving up that draft capital, you're not able to kind of produce like you want to and go up and get. So some of these teams definitely hurting that they're not in the first round. The Bears are one of those teams.
Yeah, undoubtedly so. And it would take a lot to get back in the first round here. The pick is in for the 49ers. We'll keep it here as we await that selection for Kyle Shanahan and company from the 49ers. Again, the rich are getting richer. They got 2 picks in this first round, and they were highly rumored to be trading one of those picks away. Well, they did technically trade one, only moving 1 pick down in the draft. But still, they have another opportunity to move a pick at 31. We'll see what they do here. The pick is in for San Francisco, and again, Denver will next be on the clock here. So the folks out in Denver will be coming to them very shortly. The pick is in for the 49ers, and that pick is Javon Kinlaw. We just talked about a moment ago, and he's such a talented player, a big talent here from South Carolina. Jarrett, I wanted to get your thoughts on what this guy gives to a defensive line. You look at his dimensions, his size is just impressive, to say the very least, for a man who can move the way that he does. 6'5", over 320 pounds, first team All-American for South Carolina. The tackle's obviously impressive. He is also able to get to the quarterback over the past couple years, double-digit sacks for them. Jarrett, let's talk about that pick. His fit along one of the best defensive lines already in football. They just got better.
Yeah, they did. And I just like the fact that you were talking about just his size. and his ability to be able to move his hands. And I think that's what it is, hand placement, especially for a lot of these big guys on the defensive line that are trying to get to the quarterback. You got to have moves, you got to have speed, and you got to have force. And I think if you start to add that and put it together, he has that whole entire package. And so now you're bringing in a young guy that has an opportunity to grow with an already good defensive line. To me, that right there is only going to pay off dividends down the line as this team tries to get better.
We will now move on. It is the 15th pick in the draft. Jarrett, we'll come right back to you in a moment because Denver owns that pick. They finished 7-9 overall last year. They got there despite some major offensive issues. 28th in the league on offense. Joe Flacco played 8 games. He played okay, but he had a neck injury, and that is obviously a concern for them as he recovers and they move forward. They did change offensive coordinators. Pat Shurmur comes over from the Giants. He's the new offensive coordinator there. Jarrett, we'll come back to you on the Broncos. Flacco, going to be 36, I believe, this season. The injury concern there, is that a stable enough situation, or does Denver need to make a move there?
I mean, I would. I mean, we know that it's a big deal, and Joe Flacco does have a lot of history, but he is getting older, and we're looking at, a franchise that's really trying to kind of get back into the good graces, and I think you have to start to look at that quarterback position. This team needs linebacker help. They could also use a corner, or you're looking at as well a wide receiver. So to me, there's a lot of needs for Denver. Quarterback position could be there. Do you take Jordan Love right now? Is that an opportunity for them to go that route? I mean, he might fit into what they're trying to do in Denver.
Certainly could. 5 minutes are on the clock on the Denver pick at 15. Time to go to Denver to talk about what could be unfolding there for the Broncos in their draft. We're now joined by old buddy of ours, Nick Griffith, who joins us there from Fox 31 in Denver, the sports director there, to talk about what Denver needs to do tonight. Nick, the standards are obviously high for John Elway and company. What's your leaning? You obviously just heard what Jarrett thought about what they might want to do here. What's your leaning to what would best suit this Broncos team?
Hey, the Broncos are moving forward with Andrew Luck, guys. So that's the situation the Broncos have right now. And therefore, to me, this is easy. I mean, Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb, which wide receiver do you want? They both fell into the Broncos' lap. But it's maybe not so easy because I'm not quite sure which one of those talented wideouts the Broncos have rated highest on their board. We know they like the speed with Henry Ruggs. He, of course, falls a couple of spots ago to Las Vegas. But there's no question here. I think they'd love to put a wide receiver opposite one Cortland Sutton and try to get some more weapons in this Broncos offense. Pat Shurmur coming aboard here and trying to figure out what they're going to do here to get this thing moving forward, especially on offense, and try to add some more offense here for this Denver team without question.
And Nick, they did some things this offseason. Melvin Gordon, Graham Glasgow, Nick Van Nett, Ohio State guy, all signed up this offseason to try to help them out there. The